Good evening to all of you watching. Welcome to another Hatefree Talk. Tonight we are bridging Czech Republic and Thailand. Our guest is an artist and an activist, Lu Ne from Myanmar, and we will talk about the current situation, the coup, the demonstrations and protests. I will ask Lu Ne about what is happening in Myanmar just now, how are people coping with it, and what kind of scenarios are a possibility for the torn country. Lu Ne himself took part in the protests. He was also helping journalists with security. Nevertheless, the situation became too critical and he had to leave his country and escape to Thailand. And we will talk about that as well. Our guest will be masked tonight due to security reasons. And don't forget that you can also ask Lu Ne your own questions. Please write them into the comments section under this stream. We're very happy to have you here with us, Lu Ne. How do you do today?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me here.
We're certainly very happy that we could connect. So let's start the debate by summarizing the current situation. What are the latest news? What was happening today? What is happening in Myanmar right now?
Well, what has happened in Myanmar, it's really something we couldn't imagine. Right now, what's happening in a gist is that there have been over 700 deaths acted by the junta military, and also there has been over 4,000 people has been arrested. And of course, these numbers can be higher. This is just as many as we can gather. And one thing I want to point out here is that although these deaths, they seem to be becoming numbers and numbers every day, but each human lives are important. And this is just, on a mass scale, this is what is happening. And right now, if you're in the city, wherever you are, if you're at the wrong time, at the wrong place, you could get shot. If you're just minding your own business, you could get shot. Even if you don't protest or take part, they're not specifically targeting demonstrators anymore. They're just randomly killing people simply. So this is what is happening right now.
Do you know why this is happening? Why targeting people who don't even participate in the demonstration? Is that some kind of a show of the power?
Yeah, one part of it is definitely to show authority and power. And, in some sense, we can say that this security task force are also not properly trained. They don't follow any sort of international combat rules, for example, not harming the medics and so on, because we have footages where they have been beating medics for being out there, during the shootings and during the protests for helping people out from all sides. So yeah, one of it is, they're very sloppy. One of it is they want to show authority. They want to show that they don't care, and that if they feel like it, they could just, shoot anyone or fire explosives. Because, for example, one person, he was just at his home in Yangon, in the economic city, but they threw a grenade in his residence. He was just at home, and then he tried to throw it back, but of course it explodes in his hand, and then we cannot even see the pieces of the body anymore. So that's the kind of brutality that's going on.
It's been a bloodbath. You're saying 700 deaths among protesters and ordinary common people. But still, if we watch the news, there are protests every day. Is that correct? Were there protests even today?
Well, yes. Starting from a couple of days ago, protests started again on the streets. Protests have been a bit calm for past a couple of weeks because of the intense killings and the rise in death tolls and people just being, I think, exhausted in general. But since a couple of days ago, we have been seeing some sort of flash strikes going on around the major cities.
Are these protests happening only in cities, or are they even in villages, in rural areas?
Yeah, let's say in major cities, they're definitely happening, and in ethnic areas as well. But for many remote areas right now, it's difficult to gather information from them because even in major cities, mobile data is still cut off. So people with only fiber internet can get access to the internet. And even then, it is cut off from 1 a.m. to 9 a.m. So every day. So people have difficulty getting access to information or communicating with each other. And we are witnessing these shootings and killings in the cities, but also, for example, in Karen State, in some of the remote areas, the military junta at the State Administration Council have been launching airstrikes even. So some of the people there, they have to, dug up bunkers to avoid from attacks.
We're going to go into a little bit more details later about your experience and what you've seen in Myanmar. But first, I would like to debate for some time the reasons why this happened. And I think we need to go a little bit into the, let's say, 20th century. Was that the military junta was ruling Myanmar for around half a century? Can you describe the regime a little bit in just briefly? What kind of regime was it before 2010, let's say?
So before 2010, maybe it could be a little bit more straightforward because before that, it was 88 and let's say 97, where a military grew power more in the government. So during those times, the information was also cut off in the early years of aftermath of 88. But after that, it gradually got open, and before 2010, the military junta wanted, right before 2010, they seemed to want to change, to a more democratic country. But of course, since we as Burmese have been also living through all these different political systems kind of manipulated by the military, so we also know, that might not be the real intention here. Yeah, but we can go more details about it later, yeah.
Sorry, I'm asking because I just want to check if you agree with what we seem to know about the junta. It was very cruel regime for the 50 years. It was the military was powerful, and they were controlling most of the economical, political, and social aspects of life in Myanmar before 2010. Is that correct?
Yeah, they control basically all the ministries and government. Basically, it's an authoritarian government with a lot of censorships on media and freedom of speech, and also on art scene. For example, I have a filmmaking background, so people were not able to curse in movies or show smoking scenes or that reflect their culture and religion, that kind of thing. And also lots of independent media, or there were like independent media was non-existent, only like state-owned media and newspapers were released, of course. And then like there were sanctions on economic part too. Yeah.
Yeah. And Myanmar was considered among the poorest countries in Asia at the time.
Yes, true. Especially after 1960s, Myanmar became one of the most poorest country. Yeah.
And then something maybe slightly strange happened around 2010. Can you describe what was it?
Well, 2010 was supposedly a democratic change for the country, right? So in 2008, they wrote a constitution. The military wrote the constitution, and based on that, they held a supposedly democratic election. And but in 2010, the USDP was the party of the military, and they still won the most seats. But by 2015, the what most will consider the actual election, um, it's where the opposition party NLD won with the sliding votes, and so that's it in terms of voting and election. But also we can talk more later about how the democratic values are stored on this constitution, because even after 2015, military still has 25% of the parliament. And then, basically, if someone wants to pass something in the parliament, 75% has to agree. So if all the 25, in theory, if all the 25% of the military rejects, then it would never pass. So yeah, it was like a sort of a distorted democratic transformation, I would say.
And what would you say was the atmosphere of the change? Because I would think that people were quite happy that it seemed that the military regime was over in a way.
Change in 2015.
After 2010, when your country opened up, it started the transformation. It started trading. It started with capitalism, and all of these new huge major changes were happening in the country. So what was the atmosphere? Were people happy about it, or?
Yeah. In 2015 election, I could definitely feel that most people seemed to be happy that they were able to show their voices and their votes to the party they want to vote for, which was NLD. And what happened was, economically, Myanmar also became one of the fastest economic growth, had the fastest economic growth in Southeast Asia. The GDP got higher. There were like minimum wages program sorted out. Education curriculum were updated, although there are controversies around it, but at least they were reviewed and updated. And also foreign investment were stronger. The tourism got better since more people were coming. Accommodation prices were lowered. All these things. But still, it's all happening on this 2008 constitution. So people were still happy that there were more freedom in freedom of speech. On one hand, there were less censorship on media and broadcasts. They also issued private broadcasts. They gave license to private broadcasts, which are revoked right now, actually. But at that time they did, and but also on the other hand, even in that era, they had this law called 66D, and basically it's a kind of law where they can arrest you for writing anything on social media if they find it if they find it's a defamation or something. Yeah.
Mhm.
So there's also some
When I
challenges like that.
when I visited the country around the time, I also remember that a lot of political prisoners were released at the time.
Yes, true. It's kind of like a cycle again with what's happening now, because there a lot of prison when when you came around that time, there were a lot of political prisoners that were released, and now there are there are political prisoners that are being detained again, and um, people are still striking for them to be released. So it's kind of like the cycle is happening again
Mhm.
right now.
So in a way, it seems that the military junta, the regime, did not really change that much. But how did the society in Myanmar changed? What did you yourself see and felt in those last 10 years? What did you personally, for example, appreciated the most?
Hmm. So I think for to answer this question, there is like a personal view and on a collective view, and also the challenges behind it.
Mhm.
So personally, I am happy that there were less censorship on creative scene. People were able to express more with their art and so on. And then when people are able to focus on art, it's also kind of mean that we are in a kind of welfare state. So on a um, collective level. So can you repeat the question again?
What would you what would you say were the major changes in society in the last 10 years?
Yeah,
Um,
so like so people were being open-minded about several things. For example, like LGBTQ rights. They were this kind of community was oppressed during before 2010. For example, police would arrest a transgender and try to remove the clothes or like harass them and whatnot. But after 2015, were um, those were happening less, or they were almost non-existent in major cities, anyways. And also there were more ethnic media who were able to report their news on their own. They don't have to go through a centralized system where they have to report, the capital and then broadcast from there. So those are some of the benefits in terms of my experience, because usually my background was in journalism and multimedia. So that's what I see. But the challenges are again, even during those times, the government was either not the government was not efficient in negotiating with ethnic minority communities. For example, they have what's called EAO, ethnic armed organizations, that government simply regard them as rebels. But we can argue on that. But anyways, um, they were not able to negotiate with them with what they want and what is needed to be done. So there were still a civil wars that were happening even during those times.
Mhm. That's something that maybe some people don't realize, that even though Myanmar opened up, there were many people coming for business, for tourism. There was still a number of wars, especially around the border areas. And when I came to Myanmar, it was between 10 to 15 local conflicts. So there was never really a complete peace in the country. Is that right?
Yeah, that's true. There was never a complete peace, and it's also interesting because when this coup happened, my friends in Yangon or major cities said, "Oh, there will be a civil war now," because there's already been civil wars in Myanmar, but people in the mainland area, they don't, kind of like being cut off from this information, or in their convenient, comfortable lifestyles to kind of give attention to those civil wars. So there are some changes happening with this coup as well. More people in the mainland area or major cities are now understanding better about how military have been uh, raiding and killing in those ethnic minority areas.
It's maybe even quite hard for people in Europe to understand the diversity and complex situation in Myanmar. How many ethnic tribes are there officially?
So your question, how many groups, or what did you
How
say?
many tribes are there officially in Myanmar?
I'm sorry, the network is not so good, but I'm assuming you're asking about how many armed groups.
How many ethnic groups altogether?
So the network reception is a little bit bad, but for to explain the ethnic minorities issue. So it has been always been a very complicated issue in our country, because if you ask most Burmese people, they will say there are 135 ethnic minority groups, which is also a very controversial list, because many also claim that it's a made-up list made by the military junta to kind of divide the groups. And some go back to British times where there were only like 4 ethnic groups, but then nowadays most people would accept that there are 7 main ethnic groups. That, of course, this is the traditional way of describing the ethnic groups, but we still haven't count groups like Rohingya, for example, or basically even like Chinese Burmese, or anything else. There's only, most people would say there are 7, and this is kind of the main narratives is going right now. But of course, there's also issues attached to it. Yeah.
Some of those minorities were at war with the military for decades, like the Karens or maybe the Kachin army. Is that true?
Yeah. I mean, Kachin, Karen, those are some of the ethnic minority groups, and then many of them have been fighting with military for over 70 years now. So it's been a long civil war happening in the country. So right now, there are more, let's say, insurgent groups, or ethnic minority armed groups, however people will address it. There are more of them now, and then the strongest armed group is called Wa Armed Group. They have 50,000 soldiers, and their main business is planting opium and then selling across China, and they usually don't get involved in armed conflicts because they just want to keep their status quo, most of the time. Whereas other ethnic organization like KNU or KIA, they are more directed towards the protection of the people, their own people who are being oppressed from the military junta. So these groups are some of the main groups that want to fight back, a combat against military after this coup. And personally, I know a couple of youngsters, who are in my network that after this coup has happened, they were going to those ethnic minority areas because they feel like once military junta started shooting people, they felt like non-violent resistance do not work anymore, and they felt the need to arm themselves, and they were now getting training from them and in hiding. So those things are also happening, and which is also, of course, beyond my imagination, that I never thought this would happen in my life, as in knowing people who are risking their lives to fight against this unimaginable, brutal junta. And yeah, this is just one of the stories.
Since you mentioned it, would you say that right now more people are for the peaceful solution, the peaceful protests, or they are thinking about resistance in terms of taking arms?
I mean, generally, we can say that there's a split, between violent and non-violent solutions. Some people seem to be still supporting these non-violent solutions, like, for example, banging pots and pans at night, doing flash strikes, or just like showing resistance in a creative way every day, by projecting art, or for example, on Easter, painting only eggs and posting on social media, all these things. But also, some also feel like these are ineffective or not useful, and they feel like the revolution is not a revolution until without weapons. So there seems to be a split between that as well. And in the middle of that, some people are being displaced. I think more than a quarter of a million is being displaced right now. And and some people are trying to flee across the border by land, which is not definitely not easy right now, with both Indian and Thai government being strict about their border laws. So we are one of the lucky ones that were able to get out and move here, and now trying to start something without having to worry about border issues or something. Yeah.
Okay, we'll talk about your escape a little bit later. Let's just I'm going to ask you for your own personal opinion. Why do you think this happened? Why coup? Why this year? Why so sudden? Why such a sudden change from all this hope and transformation, and you were on the path to democracy? So why now?
So if I talk about this from like a third person view, we talk about democratic transformation and so on, but also it's important to ask what kind of democracy are we talking about, because we talked about military having 25% of the parliament by default, and the rest are NLD and a few others, minor party groups. So basically, we can say that in the government, there are only two main groups: NLD and SAC, like which is like military council. And and we can find out who are the main leaders according to the constitution, because from NLD side, Aung San Suu Kyi seemed to be the leader, and from the military side, the current incumbent Mayor Line seemed to be the leader. So Myanmar has to retire after 65, and I think he was 63. We have to confirm on that, but basically he wants to stay in power. He doesn't want to retire because, according to the law, you have to retire after 65. Where else? Aung San Suu Kyi was over 70, and for her position, she can still be there. So in a way, both of them believe that if they had the total power in the country, they will do better for the people. So this is what they seem to believe. And for me online, actually, for the outsider view, the coup seems to be a sudden event. But me online has been warning about it publicly. He has been giving hints about there could be a possibility that there could be a coup. If they don't call this meeting or so on, and people just didn't believe that it would happen. And especially for me, I felt like after monitoring the election, and which would happen in November, and I felt like there have been a lot in my work life, so I've been like trying to stay away from news. But on the 1st February, when it really happened, of course nobody believed it. And I also didn't know what was going on in the morning because all the communication was cut, and people just said, "Oh, there's a coup now." Then everybody was getting grocery supplies, taking money out of their banks. All the panic, started on the first day. So why we are not also still exactly sure, because for power they still have 25% of the parliament. So but I think military as an institution, they want to stay in power as much as they can, or they want more power, and also I think they want to control businesses on their own. Which they have declared that even if other countries try to sanction them, they can live with a few friends. That's what they stated, which means usually China, Russia, or India, Thailand. Yeah. So exactly why we're not sure yet, but it's mostly they want more power and want to also have complete control on businesses. Yeah.
I think for most people, it's fortunately quite unimaginable to to have an idea what is coup d'état. Can you describe a little bit more how was the day for you when it was happening? What was going on inside you? What were you feeling?
So yeah, I remember the first day. Of course, I think there was a Myanmar media who warned. I think it was Myanmar Now who warned that there could be a coup within 72 hours before that day. But people were not taking it very seriously. Also, including myself, because I thought, yeah, it's 2021, and also we're still voting on the constitution. Why would they make a coup, seize a coup? But I woke up early in the morning around 6:37. I woke up to a lot of messages from my friends asking me if I'm okay, especially friends from outside of the country. And then I didn't know what was going on because the internet was down. We cannot use the phones, or we cannot even call or SMS. So when I checked through the messages, I realized, yeah, there must be a coup. And I look through my balcony, and then I see people running to the mart, running to the bank, and trying to get their money, get the supplies. And of course, people were panicking on the first day. And on that day, we got the internet again, and then it was confirmed, there's a coup. The leaders of the current government have been detained, and everyone was just quiet for next 2 days because they didn't know what to do. Some of them they have lived through this kind of emergency situation, so they're getting emergency kits, preparing bags, and basically preparing for the worst case scenario. So for me, the first thought I was like, yeah, I'm done with this. I thought this is not gonna happen, but this happened, and I'm done with this. Especially, I have been thinking I want to go study in Europe for that year, but apparently it's not happening now soon. So for me, I personally, I love the people there. I love the country, even though there are a lot of political turmoil and complications. But this kind of intense moment can make me hate about why I'm living there. So that was my first thought. Like, I'm done with it. I want to go. I don't want to live there anymore. But then after 2 days, I saw all the protests as well. How many people there were like millions of people going out on the streets. People were shouting their voices, and also at the same time, many of my friends needed help in everything. When people started supporting civil servants, started supporting civil disobedience movement. They needed funding, they needed top-up cards, they needed a safe house. And at that point, me and my friends, we cannot just stay neutral or stay out of this anymore, because we had to do something. We wanted to do something. So we just started helping out journalists, activists, and also civil disobedience participants in finding fundings and so on. Because, for example, some journalists are on the run. They are being, chased by the military junta, and some of them have medical issues, and they're not in under circumstances or a situation to go to a hospital or have proper health care. So these are the things that we have been working on since the coup has happened, and yeah. So that's in a short way. At one point, people, my friends of friends started to get arrested, and a couple of my friends started to get arrested, and it got closer and closer to us. So we had to find a way to get out of the country, which was the safest option for us.
You said you were providing internet security and communications security. I think it's also maybe quite difficult to imagine for us now. We are so used to having access to internet, to information, to telephone, to text messages, but that was a big problem, wasn't it?
Yeah. So when we didn't have the phone internet, it freaked everyone out. Of course, for people like us who has network with outer Myanmar, and having enough financial situation to buy top up the stuff, we learned that we can download Bluetooth messaging apps to connect between 300 meters, 30 meters or something like that, and all these things. But for people in many areas, they had no idea what to do, because the communication just went down, and then it kind of went back to this like Stone Age, era where you have to go physically to another person to find out information, So the sudden change definitely shocked everyone. And even though we got the internet back, also on our mobile data and so on, but since after around March, they cut off the mobile data. So people do not have internet when they go out of the house. They have to use internet at home, and even at home, only like fiber internet works. So they were effectively shutting down, many parts of the country from information, except like major cities, maybe, because major cities can afford usually fiber internet, but many areas cannot afford. Yeah.
You were definitely at risk of being detained, imprisoned. Were you scared before you actually left the country? Or was it a very intense situation for you?
Yeah. So I don't want to dramatize what's going on because it's not actually fun. Being scared of being shot or being arrested. So for me, basically, we were staying as much as we can. Of course, it's my home, it's my country, it's my city, so I don't want to leave there. I have plans that I want to do for my future and so on. But what happened was, we were staying as much as we can there, and once my phone was tapped, which was 2 days before I leave, because I could hear the scratches sound and people talking over my wire and so on. And also, one of my sources told me they got my name on a list, but it was also a wrong name that I use, as an anonymous. So they were not able to find out my real name. But then, that was not fun. I had to, run around safe houses because the place I was staying was also not safe, because every night the convoys would come. They would and deploy soldiers and started shooting windows or slingshotting windows. So they were breaking windows in our street, and also, they put a watch group in front of my building as well, because there was an important building, a religious site. So yeah, it was one of the most weirdest and life-changing experience to have to run away from from a literal life danger. And so physically, I was also not going out protesting and so on. So I also felt like physically there wasn't much I could do. What I was doing to help the country was also, mostly online or computer work. So I figured, I could be in a safer physical location and continue this work, and plan about myself later, because this thing is gonna go, optimistically speaking, it's gonna go for at least a year, but that's very optimistic. We are expecting at least, of course, a couple of years, and hoping the best it could end there. But we have to see how it goes.
There are definitely reports of crimes against humanity. There are reports about torture, kids being beaten, shot. There are reports about rape, night raids. You said there are at least 700 victims now. What is your personal opinion about the army, about the people who do that? Who are these people? How come they are able to do this to their own nation?
That's a very good question, because there are so many things I can talk about it. Maybe it's easier to start from what someone told me. A taxi driver once told me he doesn't care which government it is, as long as they care of the people's welfare and the humanity in general. He doesn't care if it's military or NLD. So there are some people like that. But it's everyone, almost everyone agree that these kind of atrocities and lawful killings, and basically just like a lawless bloodbath should happen. And why do they do it is a very good question, because we also try to figure out why, what kind of person would do something atrocious like this. So for decades, military institutions have been having some sort of parallel world with their own schools and institutions within the military, right? So they have their own medical university, they have their own, technical universities, self-defense universities. So, and also one point is many of the soldiers, especially troopers, they were recruited when they were younger. They were basically recruited by force, especially from ethnic minority areas or remote areas, and they grew up there. Some got a family. Their generation grew up there, so it has been going on for decades. So there are generations of people living parallel to what the civil society has been living. And for many of them, they have it's the institution that put them that threatens their family, so they don't dare to defect. And so for many of them, they truly believe that military is doing things that are better for the people. They see this protest as an anarchism. They always call them as anarchists or an angry mob. So I mean, we don't have time to go deeper psychological, aspects of them, but that's a general idea of them, living in their own reality and believing this is the truth. This is what is needed to be done regarding killings. Yeah. And some of them are just kind of testing playground. Yeah. Please continue.
I wanted to ask about the information sources, because some journalists, some people are describing that one of the reasons why they live in a bubble is because they don't really have access to other information than from the military itself. Is that right?
You mean they cannot get access to outer information from the military, within the military?
Yeah, they basically they rely on
Yeah, that's also that's definitely also a thing, because especially when the coup happened, the military housing or the police housing, they couldn't use Facebook without a VPN, or the police and soldiers' Facebook accounts were monitored, and they were only allowed to watch state broadcast media, you know. So yeah, that's also definitely they were also kind of blocked off from outer information.
By the way, maybe it's interesting to ask about Naypyidaw, the military capital, the official capital of Myanmar. Are there any protests happening in Naypyidaw, or that is definitely not a possibility?
I don't know about possibilities, but right now it's also been a little bit calm, because something interesting or strange was that in Naypyidaw, this is also where they have their bases, most of their military bases there. So they definitely want to protect the area. And if you're someone who are a bit familiar with Myanmar, you know how ridiculous that capital city is, because there is like 20 lanes road, and there's only like 3 motorbikes and 1 car, using it. Most of it is most people just go there for like parliament issues or governmental issues. So what happened now was like during, I think I would say at the late February or early March. I mean, we were able to see that military families and friends, who are living in the housings, they were moving out of the country. So that what it means is that now they also don't have friendly fire anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So whoever there that are left that are not them is not affiliated to military. So it's easier for them to arrest them and kill them. So it's been like really quiet. And right now they're trying to sue the Aung San Suu Kyi and the former president with a few charges, and they're holding a hearing too in April.
Do we know what is happening to Aung San Suu Kyi right now? Where is she? How is she doing?
Yeah, well, she was silent for a long time, except in March they had their first hearing, a closed hearing with a video conference. And of course, no media was able to talk to her directly, but her lawyer talked to her, and the lawyer, explained back to the media they're still proceeding with the charges. She's under a few charges, including possessing. Sorry, not sure how to translate in English, but including possessing a illegal communication device. So right now, the hearing is just water in their hands in the military. The lady is still under house arrest, including some of her acquaintance from NLD party.
Okay. Can you describe a little bit about what's happening in Thailand right now? Is there a community of people from Myanmar getting together there? Are there many people escaping, or you are kind of isolated there?
So, like I mentioned before, we were one of the lucky ones that were able to, escape legally in a way. But many others. There were thousands of people trying to cross to Thailand by land, and then they were still rejected, so they couldn't get across. However, there are also some people who were entering illegally. A few people entering illegally from my networks that I know of, and also there are some journalists arriving to Thailand, and then they're grouping, each other to form a community, especially during this coup era, a period to help each other out, and especially from sharing the rent and so on. And for me, from my side, I've been helping people people that are left in Myanmar to either help get across the country, or like still providing safe houses in the country, because I have my own networks and I could use those resources from here. So that's the gist of what's been happening according to my experience.
Just a quick question: Do you see yourself coming back to Myanmar anytime soon?
It's difficult because for me, I just want to stay in the country for a while, and then take my time and plan my studies or whatever, and go study there, and then come back to Myanmar, and then use my knowledge, and try to be part of the change in the country that was going forward. But all of these things are now in a rebooted mode. I have to restart everything now. So I'd rather just right now, my thought is I would rather just stay here, do things that I can in my capacity, especially things that are related to multimedia, because we're gonna need products like radio broadcasting soon. If they keep cutting off internet in remote areas, the only thing they can get access to is radio. So I might start doing those projects, handling those projects, or take part of them, but we don't know. So yeah, so I don't see myself going there anytime soon. I will be somewhere outside of Myanmar, I guess.
Let's talk about the support of the world community. Are you happy with any support that's been given by the international community, or is it absolutely not matching your expectations?
Well, personally, I don't have any expectations, or even I don't think that there would be a solution coming from international community so far, because I knew that they would state that they condemn the coup, they're against the violence and the killings, but these are just statements, and then many of them would go straight to on sanctions. I mean, I guess sanctions could work, but in the past, it has not been very beneficial to the citizens. It only usually just benefited, the authoritarian government itself and the cronies, because they owned most of the main businesses and enterprises, and people were left with nothing. So I guess they also had this ASEAN meeting, and they had a similar consensus, restore democracy or stop the violence and so. But I guess that is good that international community is saying that, but also there should be some repercussion, like some sort of follow-up work, basically. Or are you just asking the military junta to promise by their own words, or will there be actions after that? And also it was a short time, so I can explain so much about the opposition government, which is there was a loud thunderstorm. So
I'm sorry. Okay.
anyway, so
I was
so the
I
opposition
was really
government.
hoping it's not an explosion, man. Okay, thank you.
It was. Oh yeah, I mean, I can talk so much about subtle PTSD I got with this current issues too. Because even when I arrived to Thailand, first couple of weeks, I was still under alert if I hear some sort of bangs or ambulance or sirens. Because that was what I had to look out for when I was in Yangon. And they were doing it at nights, in the mornings, daytimes. So yeah, it did give me some sort of fear as well. But
I'm
there's
going
an
to stop.
opposition government.
Sorry. I just need to say that we have around 90 seconds left. If there is somebody who would like to support somehow people in Myanmar from outside, what would you say is a good way of doing so?
Yeah, I won't describe specific names anymore, but there are a lot of fundraisers that are helping people in Myanmar, ITPs or refugees, or even journalists, civil disobedience supporters or participants, and you can find them on your way while you're surfing on the internet. And please consider funding, donating to them or funding them. But in terms of political solution, there's an opposition government, CRPH, NUG. Take a look at them, and if you feel like they're legit, they were mainly made up by the people voted by majority of the people. So take a look and then see if you can recognize them or not. I mean, that's more proactive than nothing. So yeah, that's about it, I guess.
Thank you very much. I have to say I'm personally very happy that we could talk to you. I hope that
Me too.
everything will be better one day in Myanmar. We wish you all the best and have a good night.
Yes, Dikuimos, thank you very much for having me here too and letting me talk about, current issue in my country and myself. There was a great chat. Thank you very much, Dikuimos again, and Nasravi.